Crowhill here. Today we review an India Pale Ale and discuss the Communist Manifesto. Hey guys, good to see you. What's going on?
All right, gentlemen.
Hey,
Good to see you. Longinus is here. Very good, very good. How about some beer and conversation?
Oh, that sounds like a great idea. What are we drinking tonight?
Well, it's an IPA from Cigar City.
Oh, fantastic. I like IPAs.
All right, well, what's on your mind?
Well, you know, I've been wondering about this thing that people talk about a lot, the oppressor and the oppressed.
I know, it seems to be like a very hard line.
Everybody
here.
talks about it, and that's why I asked you guys to look at the Communist Manifesto.
That's good.
And,
Either or.
Either or, yeah. So I thought maybe we'd talk about that, but first let's get into this beer.
All right, so it's Cigar City. It's Tampa, Florida, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And I don't know, I think it's the only Florida brewery that I know that's you can steadily get in this area.
I can't think of another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a double IPA called Florida Man.
Mm-hmm. We have a good show on Florida Man, by the way.
So what do you got there? What do you think? So
Okay.
it's definitely not hazy. It's a good old fashioned regular IPA.
Yeah.
It has it's coming in at a 7.5.
Yeah, that's a little strong.
Yeah.
It's got not an overpowering aroma, but it's
Nice.
got a very strong hop flavor to it.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of these IPAs, they just punch you in the face with the hop aroma, and you're not getting that here, but you are getting a good, strong hop flavor. And it's also malty.
Yeah, there's an aftertaste.
Yeah.
That is really kind of cool.
Yeah,
You say malty?
This is my idea of a little bit of backbone and some good hop flavor, and on the double IPA end of the
to it. 7.5, that's pretty close to it.
I mean, once you get to 8,
That's a double IPA,
you're in the imperial zone.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So actually, this is quite good. So keep them coming, guys. And if you wanted to, you could fly us down there and make it do a show at your brewery. I mean, that would work too.
I mean, I think that would really boost your beer sales.
I think it would. I think you guys would really. It would
You'd
help
make
you
out
a
on
lot.
the deal.
Yeah. So Communist Manifesto.
Okay, so how about the opening two sentences?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So I think you mean in the introduction.
Yes.
We
The
have
specter.
The specter. Yes. A specter
Is
haunting Europe. The specter of communism. All the powers of old Europe have entered into a holy alliance to exorcise this specter.
Okay, so he's acknowledging. Wait a minute, can we get a little background here?
Who is this guy?
Who are these two guys, and when was it written? And what's
going on?
the context?
Right, yeah.
We got ahead of ourselves.
all right. So most people say that Karl Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto, and that's incorrect. He had a co-author,
Okay,
named Friedrich Engels.
I know. He gets. I mean, even though he's on the cover, he's just totally overlooked.
Yeah.
Right. He's just the guy that funded Karl Marx. That's really what it was.
We'll get into that. Yes.
So he's a contributor, but I think the final draft is written by Marx, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So,
Okay.
when did Marx live?
All right. So Karl Marx, he was born in 1818.
Yeah.
Died
Just after me.
1883. He received a doctorate in philosophy. He was a young Hegelian at the time, so it was really important
Hegel
about
was
that.
a big deal at that time. Yeah.
Which, if you all can explain Hegel to me, I'd appreciate it. Editor, he was an editor and philosopher. Met Engels, and it had just an incredible lifelong relationship and friendship with.
Which is good because he didn't have a lot of other friends. He was kind of an irascible guy.
I think they both
turned off everybody.
I think they both picked things out of one another's beards.
Right. So, and joined in 1845. He also joined the Communist League. So communism was around.
Yeah, before
before the Communist Manifesto, but because of his enthusiasm and his intelligence, you would have to say, and Marx's money, and I mean Engels' money.
That's right. Marx didn't have much money.
Yeah, Marx never had money. In 1848, they were asked to write the Communist Manifesto. So they were writing it for an organization. They were trying to be communist, sort of in the authorship. This is for a political party.
Yeah.
And not just for themselves.
Yeah, Marx did not invent communism.
But people didn't take it very well, by the way.
Right.
1849, he gets expelled from Belgium and Germany.
Yeah.
Other things, he coined the idea of historical materialism, which had great ramifications in academic realms in the 20th century.
Right.
When historical materialism states that human history is the history of class evolution through the technology, material production, and economic change. So those are the things that really create human development. And what we think about it can always be drawn back to those things.
Okay.
He finally moved shortly after he got kicked out of Belgium and Germany. He moves to London and lives there for most of his time, all the way up to 1883.
Was he kicked out of there because he didn't smell very good? Because I understand he had personal hygiene issues.
Well, that was probably part of it, but it was also they didn't like what he was saying. He was just an agitator.
He got kicked out of France. He fired from jobs. He upset all the other radical parties by criticizing them. He
seems like a bit of a critical fellow.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
kind of a miserable guy, but a guy who totally stuck to his principles, right? He's like, you know what? I shouldn't say this stuff because I'm going to lose friends.
I'll say it anyway.
I do not care.
Right. So, he died in total poverty. And he was living in total poverty too. It was it was Frederick Engels that allowed him to survive. But the two things that two quotes which I think are important. One of them, he was the one that said religion is the opiate of the masses.
Right.
So total atheist. I don't even think he was a humanist. I don't think he could write the Communist Manifesto and also be a humanist. And he was also the guy that went to church on Sundays. And why did he go to church?
To listen to Bach, I think.
To listen to Bach. It was the only place where you could listen to Bach for free.
Yeah.
So that was a thing. Now, Frederick Engels, after 1883, Frederick is born in 1820, dies in 1895. After Marx dies, he just devotes his whole life of getting all his works together, creates Das Kapital Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, all the other things out there. So he really keeps Marx's imprint on human history alive. He was born in Prussia and joined the Prussian army, so he was just like a regular guy.
Engels apparently was raised by a devout evangelical family that was wealthy.
Right. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And his father was one of the first industrialists.
Yeah.
And that's where he got all his money from.
Marx's family was Jewish, but they converted to Lutheranism just because that's kind of what you had to do at that time. And they made this sort of half-hearted conversion to Lutheranism, but never really believed it all that much, and Marx never believed it at all. But so you have Engels, who was raised by an evangelical family and then rejected Christianity, and Marx, who came from a situation where they rejected Judaism and then had this sort of faux Lutheranism.
Yeah, right.
And
he didn't buy any of it.
Right.
So, that's really it. He dies in 1895. Really, their personal lives were not very exciting. Engels was a woman's man. He was a player.
Is that right?
And and in fact,
even with that horrible beard and mustache that he's got.
Oh, he was like, he was writing letters to Marx that says, hey, all I really want to do is hang out with the French women.
Is that right?
Yeah. I'd do anything for that beard and mustache.
I know. I don't know.
I don't know. Eating soup looks like
it
would make
that would be difficult with that soup saver.
Trim the stash, but the rest of it's pretty impressive. Now, so we're talking what, 1848?
1848 was when the Communist Manifesto was published.
is the year of revolution. There were revolutions all throughout Europe that kind of petered out, but you're smelling revolution in the air.
Yeah.
Bob Dylan style. It
was a hard time. And this was in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, and you have people living in squalor and people working all day and hardly getting paid, and children dying, and it was.
You had the Emancipation of the Serfs, which was 1861, so that wasn't too far in the rearview mirror. That feudal system ending, and the new capitalism, industrialization.
Yeah,
he's swimming in that stuff.
Now, my understanding, by the way, I'm not sure if I have this exactly right or not, but my understanding is that capitalism is what the Marxists call the free market system, and it's like a pejorative. It's against the free market system, and then people who defend capitalism say, yeah, we're capitalists, but that's actually something that the communists used as a slur against.
And they just co-opted it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like,
queer
women saying, yeah, we're nasty women. When Trump says she's a nasty woman, and the women say, okay, fine, we're nasty women. All right, so what are we going to do with this? How are we going to work through?
Let's do our best to give it justice.
Give it not a shot.
Yes, this is in the way Marx intended it to be heard.
Okay,
and so we've identified that that communism is in the air and it's a threat.
Yeah,
and he says good, and we need to present it as such.
I want to have a minute on this first paragraph here, because we talked about this specter haunting Europe and the Holy Alliance to exorcise this specter. And I've heard some commentary on that language that's used there, because Marx apparently, he wasn't a Christian, and he had some kind of dark influences on his life. And I've heard different ways of parsing that out. I think what he's mocking the people who are criticizing him. He's saying, look, there are all these religious people who think of communism as this specter, this spirit, this awful thing that needs to be exorcised. And he starts off by just mocking that attitude.
I think he's saying, we're here, and you're afraid? Good, because we're coming for you.
Right. And he names the people that should be afraid.
Yes.
The Pope and Tsar. Metternich,
whatever the heck that is.
Yeah. Well, I could tell you.
Okay, so you have a good
Prince
footnote.
von Metternich was the Chancellor of Austria Empire. Francois Pierre Gouzol was the French historian and statesman, prime minister at the time of the Revolution of 1848.
What do you have? Cool footnotes on your
version? I got a 1950 version. I got the real thing.
I got a flimsy little thing. It doesn't have any of these footnotes. So I think
I didn't even get a forward or an afterward. I just got the thing.
It starts off with, like you say, we're here. I'm punching you in the face.
Right. And then
that's what pretty much says.
So to get to. Does he go straight to he doesn't go straight to the bourgeoisie. He says, okay, all of history hitherto existing is a history of class struggles. So you say, ever since you stopped hunting and gathering, as soon as you get into a civilization you're immediately going to get some hierarchy.
Yes.
And then the ancient world, the Greco-Roman ancient world was just based on slavery.
Yeah.
So you had, the slave owners and slaves.
Yes. So one of the core propositions of the Communist Manifesto is that history is a matter of class struggle, and you can reduce that down to the oppressor and the oppressed.
Yes. And people are
that's what you were
still
thinking about it.
Muttering that same, dichotomy, dividing the world in the simplest. Oh no, I'm not criticizing.
Yeah. Okay. So right. So right now we're saying we're going to try to extract from this book what his core principles are. One is class struggle. Two is oppressor oppressed, and the third is that it's basically two groups.
Yes.
That it's the bourgeoisie and the proletariat.
And then after you, so I was at the ancient world of slaves and non-slaves. Then you had after the end of the Roman Empire, you had feudal lords. So you had people who owned massive tracts of land and the people that worked on them. Mm-hmm. Then when the merchant class came along, they said, well, we have some money, we have some power, and why don't we get more of a say in this government? All these money makers. Mm-hmm. And that was the beginning of the bourgeoisie. Mm-hmm. And then it sort of push them aside, and
I think, and what he says is the result of that is that that this situation has left no other bond between man and man than naked self-interest.
Yes. So this is your first, the beginnings of the real harsh criticism of capitalism as being nothing else than being about profit at any expense.
Yes.
Right. And going back to your medieval society or post a little bit past that, with the idea of the middle class, the merchant class rising and taking power, all of a sudden you got this thing called the Industrial Revolution, and that revolution just sort of exponentiates the evolution of that to the point of huge factories with several people running the factory and hundreds of factory workers that really are just unskilled laborers.
Because Marx speaks kind of fondly about the skilled craftsman.
Yes. So he has. I put a note on the
side of
I put a note on the side of my thing. Marx the conservative.
Yes.
Because
he looks back at at the medieval village.
Yes. And the guilds and the skilled laborers and the people who had, and he looks back on the shopkeepers and that sort of stuff, and he looks on that fondly. And so, in a sense, you get a picture that what he's saying about there being two groups, the bourgeois and the proletariat, and this class struggle and this oppressor and oppressed, doesn't necessarily, I would venture to say, I'm not sure Marx would say that necessarily applied in the past, in this past that he idolizes to some extent. But he's saying it applies now, in the Industrial Revolution, now at this point where you have these people who are only out for profit, and they're just using labor as the way they would use a chicken or a cow.
And I'm going to say, I get it, Marx. The cobbler who's making shoes with his sons,
right?
And they are making the shoe from beginning to end, and they sell it, and then with that money they buy the flour and whatever else they need, and the family is together.
Yes,
the family's working together. You're with your children all the time. It's sort of like a farm life, pioneer farm life, right? You spend all of your time, and this is fulfilling and a meaningful way to live, as opposed to
what we've got now.
Right, which is unskilled, right? You're, like you said, the cobbler making the entire shoe. Now you're just what? You're just shoelace guy.
Yeah, or you're nailing on the heel or something. Yeah, you're a cog in a machine.
Right.
And you're not. You don't have the dignity of having a skill, having a profession, having something that you can call your own. You're just part of this apparatus.
Yes, and you're as replaceable as a gear on a wheel. Yeah. And there's no dignity in this, and
well, that's what Marx says, right?
Yes. I'm all Marx for the next 15 minutes. I'm pro.
All right,
sure, we can go that long.
Okay. So he's what is his what the bourgeoisie therefore produces above all are its own gravediggers. Its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable.
Yeah, so that's another core principle of the Communist Manifesto, is that this situation is inherently unstable, untenable, and will end. And they're basically digging their own grave, and that the proletariat will inevitably arise and push out.
Right, it's not like some outside force needs to come in and take over Germany. It's digging its own grave.
Yes. Now this, I think, gets back to what you were talking about before, Longinus, about historical materialism. So what the heck is historical materialism?
Well, there's I think several principles about it. One of them is the history. The evolution of history is really based on relationship of man to his or own production and his or own labor of what they do. So I think that's really important. I also think that it is. He would say it's inevitable. It's on a track that can't be changed in any way.
No, it's continuous class struggle that gets worse and worse, from the tribal to the ancient to the feudal, and then capitalism is the worst of them all, and finally people just can't take it anymore.
So let me try to rephrase this. So he's trying to say that the purpose of man, that the way you evaluate any man is in what he produces.
And what he owns,
what he owns, and what he produces,
and so where he fits in society in terms of that.
This is radically materialist, because if you think about like a religious sense of man,
which he wasn't.
But, he was not, right? So if you think about somebody who they don't think that what their life consists of is what they make or their position in society. They might think about their struggling towards nirvana, or they're struggling to be a saint, or they're struggling towards being a good father and husband. Right. So, and those things are okay. Right. I don't want to get into criticism.
I got a lot of things to say about that too.
Right. Sorry, I'm not trying to get into criticism yet. But so what you're saying is that this historical materialism kind of
defines man.
Defines man as what he produces.
What he produces and where he fits in with that labor.
All of all of the relationships,
which is class struggle.
Yeah. All of the relationships between from king and peasant to husband and wife are materialistic and are about power.
Yeah, exactly.
And which is where the
modern feminists would take
the Foucaultian postmodernists.
So we could talk about that later.
So in terms of establishing basic principles, I think we've done most of them. Can we get to the 10 points here?
You want to jump right there? Okay, that's great.
Unless there's something else, because I think we've covered the main basic points of fundamental.
But we're down to nothing more than this capitalist and proletariat. So he's saying what? We need a manifesto here.
Yes, we need some rules. We need some rules. And he finally gets to it, like 2/3 of the way through. Right. He gets to it. There are 10 points. Abolition of property in land and application of all rents to land. Okay, so give us number 2.
A heavy progressive or graduated income tax.
Abolition of all right of inheritance.
Confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. That wouldn't sit well today.
Okay.
Right.
Well, no, these are immigrants, right?
Yeah.
Right. People leaving. As opposed to people coming in.
Okay, right, yeah.
Centralization of credit in the hands of the state by means of a national bank. With state capital and an exclusive monopoly.
Right.
Oh. Centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state.
So that's NPR and Amtrak. Okay. Extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. Right.
Do you have more? On that?
I
on number 7?
I just thought that was.
That's it. Probably enough. Equal liability of all to work. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. I'm not even sure what that is.
Yeah. What do you got for number 9 there?
Combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradual abolition of the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the population over the country.
And then to tie all this together to make sure everybody grows up in this new utopia, free education for all children in public schools.
You've always accused public schools as being a communist plot.
Yes, it absolutely is. That could be an entire episode. I hate government-run schools.
Gosh.
All right, so that is Marxism, the Communist Manifesto, kind of trying to give it its best spin.
Yes, and it's and part 3 is very central to its time. So he goes from country to country talking about the various socialism movements that are going there and why they're all weak-kneed, Yeah.
Yeah.
But I thought it was very useful to show that there were different variations.
Yes.
The idea that communism was not just one monolithic idea. I don't want to say until the Communist Manifesto, but I think the Communist Manifesto took over the idea of communism.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Now it's time for you all.
And so, hold on. At least give me the last two sentences.
Oh, yeah. So, okay. So the last two sentences are actually quite telling and very interesting. So here we go. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a world to win. Working men of all countries unite, or workers of all of the world unite.
Yeah, workers of the world is the translation I usually hear.
Yeah,
this is a little different.
This one's working men of all countries, but
right.
yeah. Okay. So now you realize that we have all tried very hard to stick to giving it a positive spin. I despise everything about this manifesto, and it's time to start criticizing it.
I want to try to be an apologetic for a couple of things.
Okay.
I have a couple too. Go ahead.
All right.
We'll get this out of the way.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
When you look back in 1848, we gotta realize too that capitalism, as it was fully manifested in the factory system and the things, was extremely harsh.
It was harsh. No, there's no question that he's writing from a situation where things were bad.
I think some of his observations are somewhat true.
Yes, okay. if I was a crippled factory worker in Manchester, England, who was now been replaced because I've lost my left arm, I might be kind of open to some of these ideas.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, why do they get everything? We do all the work.
Yeah.
And why don't we just distribute this? And that seems like a better system. The other apology or criticism that I would make, or not criticism, apology that I would make is, this does not represent the depth of Marx's thinking.
Okay.
All right. His analysis is broad and deep, and he wrote for his entire lifetime. Saying that what he put together here in a couple of pages.
Exactly. I haven't read Das Kapital.
You haven't. It's simplistic. It's reductionist.
It's angry. It's designed to
for a point.
Yes, exactly.
With a point. It's it's something that you could plop into the hand of that one-armed factory worker and say, "Here, pass this around to your guys and see what you think."
It's not designed. Actually, here's another way to think about this. It's not designed to persuade anybody to adopt this mindset. It's like the coach talking to the team at halftime. Right? We're trying to rile you up. We're trying to get you excited. Yeah. I'm not trying to persuade you. I'm trying to build up your commitment to the party.
Right.
That's what I was trying to do.
Good.
I think it's a piece of propaganda.
Of course it is. Yes.
And I think he uses a lot. Right. Yeah. I think he uses a lot of the techniques, whether he knew it or not, whether we understood what propaganda was at that time.
Right. Yes.
But I think the first paragraph, is really, like you said, we'll go back to it since
we're talking about the specter, or are we talking about the history of all hitherto existing society?
Well, both really, but the specter is haunting Europe. Mm-hmm. That's pure, that's the rhetoric of propaganda.
Yes. A lot of this is exactly what you expect from somebody who's trying... The language is...
it's for the regular guy. And it's also for the common man. I'm sure his Hegelian friends, he's speaking in a much more high-minded way.
Yes.
And if you really think about it, I don't know what the statistics are, but how many people read back then? How many people had any ability for critical thought?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So let's go through the points.
It is. So I said it's simplistic and reductionist for effect, but his overall philosophy is also kind of both of those things.
It is. Like, let's just start with the first one.
Yeah.
the history of society is the history of class struggles. Bullshit.
And right, end of sentence.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I mean that's just utter bullshit from the start.
Right. I mean, it's
where's the nuance here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's not only the nuance, but and I'm going to say it is that he's a total atheist. Doesn't believe he believes that total religion is bullshit.
Right.
But religion has far outlived communism and far outlived class struggle than anything else. So it's not.
There are no other aspects to human interaction.
Yeah. Are you gonna, like, for example,
family, love, friendship?
Let's take the Reformation as like a big historical event. That wasn't about class struggle.
Well, you know what? I'm sure there's a Marxist who would figure it out. Of course, there was but I know a bit about the Reformation, and it's not about class struggle, right? Or how about this next one? This next one, oppressor and oppressed. Well, actually, you could kind of cast the Reformation as oppressor versus oppressed. But trying to say that explains all of human history? I would agree that there are aspects of that throughout, but to just drop everything else, I think is just too much.
And this one reminds me of a conversation I heard. I think it was Jordan Peterson talking to somebody about feminism and about this idea that you could understand the relationship between men and women as oppressor and oppressed. Right. And he said, look, most of the history of humanity is men and women trying to figure out how to get along and survive and raise their kids and not die. Exactly. Right. And this idea that it's all explained by oppressor versus oppressed, that's a ridiculously simplistic way of looking at it.
That's the anytime you hear somebody talk about the patriarchy, that's what they mean.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would also just use as an illustration, after 1945, I mean, probably because of the labor unions, you had a strong working class in America that did gain rights through negotiation with management, but the idea that it was all class struggle is again BS, because these people were fighting to keep their jobs, to increase the quality of the jobs, so they could have a quality of life outside of their class struggle, outside of their labor.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things that people say about American politics is one of the strongest defenses against communism is a strong middle class.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Because a strong middle class completely denies what we're talking about here.
Yes, because the communists were actually anti-union.
Yes.
They don't want the conditions to get better. Yep. And the conditions have to be so bad that the only recourse is violent revolution. Yes. Because if they keep making concessions and weekends and overtime and health care, we're never going to get this revolution started like that.
Here, listen to this. Society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, bourgeoisie and proletariat. Now, to some extent, if he's talking about what was going on in England during the Industrial Revolution at that time, okay, I can see some sense of that. But trying to say that as like an explanation of the way the world is,
or that there's just factory owners and workers.
Right.
There are engineers building these machines.
Yes.
There's the accountant.
Yes.
There's the lawyer. There's
people in between.
There are all kinds of There's the middle manager.
It's not just the oppressor and the oppressed.
Yeah.
That's so simplistic as to be absurd.
Yeah.
And I would like to bring up game theory.
Okay.
The idea of the non-zero sum concept.
Yes.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where if you and I were stuck on an island and there was one fish to eat, and sure, you could go ahead and take the fish and kill me, but maybe I was the guy that knew how to catch the fish.
Right.
So the idea would be like, hey, why don't we split this meal together, and tomorrow we'll go out and catch another one. That's non-zero sum, where your interaction work together to increase the quality of life of both people.
Right. And
that's not in here whatsoever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In that zero sum, the oppressor oppressed is the because you're rich, the fact that you're rich is why I'm poor.
Exactly.
Right, which is bullshit.
Which is total nonsense. Another thing, my overall impression, aside from just disagreeing with the fundamentals of this book, my overall impression is that it's so much bullshit and word salad. It's like Kamala Harris would do well with some of this stuff. The conditions of bourgeois society are too narrow to comprise the wealth created by them. And how does the bourgeois get over these crises? Stop and then cackle and laugh. Right. On the one hand, by enforced destruction. If you read this stuff, it's like, what the heck are you saying half the time? There's so much, just too many words and too much attitude and not enough clear explanation.
It also has a weird way of criticizing the bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie, by the rapid improvement of all instruments of production, sounds good, by the immensely facilitated means of communication, okay, draws all, even the most barbarian nations into civilization. The cheap prices of its commodities are the heavy artillery with which it batters down all the Chinese walls. It's saying, providing cheap goods
is a horrible thing.
Right,
no. Providing cheap goods is a good thing.
Because there's too much civilization, too much means of subsistence, too much industry, and too much commerce. Again, there's that sort of nostalgic view back to when we all lived in self-contained villages and, in subsistence living.
Yeah. But cheap prices put out of work third world country craftsmen.
Well, okay, so there is a strong element.
That's a good point, but I'm not sure if he's sympathetic.
There is an element. There's an element in here that reminds me of the dispute between, you have a local store that sells bicycles, and then Walmart comes into town.
I hear you.
And puts out of business the local guys.
And there's Walmart for doing that.
I have sympathy for that.
Yep.
Yes, I understand. I understand that kind of, you see that sort of attitude throughout this book. But on the other hand, if you're trying to buy a bike for your 7-year-old, where are you going to go? The Walmart has it for cheap.
I know. I remember going through a small town recently, and there was a bunch of signs up in there. No Family Dollar. Right? There's a Family Dollar wanted to move into this town, and the town was like, "We don't want your Family Dollar in here. Mm-hmm. We're going to kill all the other businesses." Yeah.
There's no Walmart in Vermont.
That's the way.
The whole state?
Yep.
That's the way economies work. Like, we don't burn whale oil in our lamps anymore.
To keep the whalers in
whalers in business. That's right. We don't buy buggy whips anymore. Time
candle makers.
Exactly.
Poor candle makers.
I know. So there's no longer anybody who goes out and lights the street lights. That's the way the world works.
But here's the question. Thomas Sowell, which we all should admire greatly because he's really
genius.
Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. He says there's no such thing as good and bad, only trade-offs.
Yes.
Right?
No solutions, only trade-offs.
So the question is, the idea of electricity replacing whale oil is probably, there's a really good thing for that, but there's also bad things that happen.
There's always a trade-off, right. Exactly.
Right.
There's always a trade-off.
So the question is, how does a modern society try to reduce the negative impact?
Exactly. That's a very hard question.
That's a hard question. But what's not a hard question, or what's not a good response is, we'll put some bureaucratic team together to decide what gets made, when, and where.
Right.
And that's what's going on here. So I was thinking, all those people that are in factories, nobody forced them into those factories. They left their farms out in the countryside. I watched a show. This was a terrible show about mining in Africa to get the minerals to build electric.
Right.
In the horrible conditions there. And then they interviewed these people. Well, they had all lived in villages somewhere else.
Exactly, and that was actually a step up for them.
Yes. So the circumstances seem crappy, but guess what? Yeah. In their minds, it was a step up.
That was something I had to deal with a couple decades ago. In terms of hiring Indians, hiring Indians to do work for really cheap. And I felt like, we're kind of exploiting them. And it's like, no, everybody here is really glad that they're here.
Right.
Everybody in this air-conditioned office where they can sit at a computer and do work that's 100 times better than anything else that they can do.
There's this guy named Stuart Brand. I don't know if you all heard of him. No. He was the founder of the Whole Earth catalog, which was the hippie catalog back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Right. So, and he's just been an innovative thinker throughout his whole life. But he came out with a Whole Earth Discipline book. And he talks about the great migration from the rural areas to these incredible slums. Oh, and he goes into the slums, wide-eyed and looking to see what's really going on. And he finds out that what happens when people go to these slums is, A, they find more opportunity.
Yes.
B, you find more opportunity for women.
Yeah.
C, you find environmental degradation is greatly reduced. So there's all of these incredible positives.
Yeah.
Population is plummeting because these people are going to these are moving to these slums because these women now have opportunity.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, as a society, I'm not pro-slum, right? or I'm like, well,
but
are there ways to make slum conditions better?
The point is that those people are making rational choices. I mean, I'm not going with the old idea that everybody makes rational choices all the time because it doesn't happen. We're all kind of stupid. But people are deciding, I'm better off in the slum where I can earn $2 a day than back in my little village where I'm earning 75 cents a day.
Right.
I can point out some of the major flaw. So first off, his analysis of history is, like I said, too narrow and ignores too many, unnuanced.
Yeah.
But his view of where things are going, he said all of this is only going to happen in industrial England and industrial Germany.
Right.
This is where it's going to
actually happen.
And then the agrarian
in
Russia
and China.
And then in any other places that it's tried.
Yeah.
So you're
North Korea. What the F is going on?
Right.
With that?
Your number one claim is a total fail.
Yes.
And I mean, I wonder what he would say about that. Would he say? Would he admit the failure, or would he just make excuses about? I got this one little thing wrong, but mostly I was right. And what about it's supposed to be a workers' paradise where everybody shares in everything. What about the dictatorships and the gulags and the massive death toll? Was that all part of it?
One thing that's conspicuously and obviously glaringly omitted from the Communist Manifesto is what. Okay, now what?
How are you going to implement this?
Yes. Okay, so let's say
everybody's going to get on
board. There's nothing in here.
You're going to shove it down people's throats.
You got to shove it. There's nothing in here that says, okay, what are we going to replace it with? What's going to happen next? Okay, it's as if, okay, once we throw away the bourgeoisie and the proletariat revolt and they take over, everything's going to be beautiful. Really? Well, what does that look like?
Who's going to run the factories?
Yeah. Give us some sort of idea of what the structure is going to be.
Right.
There's nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Because when the workers take control of the means of production, then they will then be able to distribute the profits that went to the fat rich guy.
Yeah.
Yeah? Really? So,
how's that going to happen?
Well, how's that going to happen?
Yeah.
And, it just will, because people will be so glad to throw off their overlords, and they'll all come together.
Everybody will be nice.
And it will all be from where did that come from? Was that from each according to his ability and to each according to his needs?
I didn't see it in
there either, but that was the idea.
Here is one tiny sliver of a thought about how you would rebuild, and that is, the price of a commodity, and therefore also of labor, is equal to its cost of production. That is complete, ridiculous nonsense. The price of something has nothing to do with the cost of producing it.
But he's saying that in communism it would.
In communism it does. But in reality, the cost of something has very little to do with the cost of producing.
It's what a person is willing to pay for it.
Exactly. The cost of something is what somebody will pay. and how much it costs to produce it, the buyer doesn't care. So this idea that the labor value of that you figure out the price of something based on the labor put into it, that's just complete nonsense.
So we're getting ready to close up here.
Yeah, I think so.
Let me get a word in.
Yeah.
So I said I understand the appeal for the 19th century factory worker.
Yeah.
And even the American in the 20s or 30s who's going, wow, this is no longer a theoretical thing. They're actually doing this in Russia, and as far as I know, it's going pretty good, right? Because you don't know what's going on over there. Mm-hmm. So I even have some sympathy for that. Mm-hmm. But the 21st century college student, or even worse, college professor, you're dumb. You're a dumb person.
Yeah, you are dumb to put up with this.
To say that all of this still makes sense to you. Again, before you have seen 100 years of failure, 100 million deaths, starvation, gulags, torture.
Yeah. Hasn't worked anywhere.
It hasn't worked anywhere, yeah. But what? But it just, they haven't done it right. They haven't done it the way I would do it. And
the thing is, there's nothing here to say what doing it right would even look like.
And, well, let me ask this question, trying to be the apologist here.
Okay.
All right.
Was there anything in Marxist thought, anything in the Communist Manifesto that helped influence the labor movement in America that drastically increased the quality of life for millions of people?
So, okay.
I don't know.
My position on that is no, because Marx did not want management and labor to get along.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of the labor of unions and the labor movement was to try to say, okay, yes, these people are living in horrible conditions. Let's make it better. And he didn't want things to get better. He wanted them all to become revolutionaries and to kill people and to start burning things.
So the manifesto has no opening for compromise or relation.
Right. I mean, because he was in open revolt against the socialists, who probably did have something to do with improving conditions and all of that, who were willing to work within the system.
And he talks about a lot of them in part 4. He talks about a lot of the movements that were trying to reform.
So I appreciate your effort there, Longinus, to at least give him a little something.
Yeah. But I think that may be all right. So I think what you have done is pointed to my biggest criticism of Marx.
What's that?
Which is, he has no room for negotiation.
No room for negotiation, no room for compromise, no room for a peaceful solution.
And I don't see it in here either. By the way.
There's 10 points there. Pretty darn clear.
Pretty bad. If I may, I'm going to read a couple things.
I forgot the part of that, how much he hates family, but go ahead.
Okay, in short, communists everywhere support every revolutionary movement against the existing social and political order of things. And then here again. They openly declare that their ends can be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions.
Yeah.
Let the ruling classes tremble at a communist revolution. Now, this reminds me, I was listening to a guy named Slavoj Žižek, who's a communist philosopher. And he's a pretty smart guy. But some of the things that he says are, he talks about revolution. And one time I was working through some of the things that he said, and I thought, and I'm not being, I'm not trying to be inflammatory or crazy here, but after listening to what he said, I thought maybe I should just kill this guy.
We would all be better off.
Because if communism were actually to take over, what would happen? We would all be up against the wall, and people would be shooting us. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So these guys, people who promote this ideology, what it results in is firing squads, death camps. It results in killing a whole bunch of people. Now the question is, here's this guy. If I'm living next to some guy, and this guy is saying every day, he's saying, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your wife. I'm going to kill your family." At a certain point, you just say, okay, enough is enough, and you get rid of that guy.
Yeah.
Right.
Why shouldn't we have that same attitude towards Slavoj Žižek and these other communist sympathizers who are promoting a a philosophy that we know perfectly well results in death and murder and destruction and
I think George Orwell will answer that question.
We should explore that one day.
We should.
In Marx's day, they didn't line up and kill him, but they did kick him out of the country.
Yeah.
We could start there.
We could start there. That would be a good start. I mean, I'm not in favor of killing people, but yeah, if we can just kick them out, that'd be fun.
So you're a threat to this country.
Why don't we go through like the faculty in the various universities and say, look, you're promoting communism? Yeah. Out.
That's a good start.
I have one last quote I want to have.
All right, let's go for it.
And I wrote my comment was just, oh boy.
I have an oh boy in here too.
Okay, go for it.
And this is where he says, there are, besides eternal truths such as freedom, justice, etc., that are common to all states of society. But communism abolishes eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality. Instead of constituting them on a new basis, it therefore acts in contradiction to all past historical experience.
Right.
And that scares the living
exactly.
out of me.
The idea that you are so smart that you're going to throw away everything and create something new. What? Oh my gosh.
It's just funny because I know you all like the woke folks. That's exactly what they're trying to do.
Yes, exactly.
It's even though I wouldn't say that maybe they're not communists, or maybe they don't know that, but that's really scary to think. I know, and you don't know.
Yeah.
Because the wisest folks say, hell if I know.
Yeah. No, the historical arrogance is
stunning.
Profound.
Stunning. All right.
Okay. Hey, Chesterton, line up another one.
Yeah, no Marx. Boo, Marx.
Chesterton.
Thanks so much for listening to Beer and Conversation with Pigweed and Crowhill. Remember to visit us at pigweedandcrowhill.com or send us an email at pigweedshow@gmail.com.